Elmridge, Pennsylvania wasn't the sort of town where stories happened. Not the kind that made headlines, anyway. Life followed a rhythm as steady as the seasons. Winter shut everything in snow and silence. Spring brought soft rains and green shoots. Summer hummed with the buzz of cicadas. And fall, oh, fall, painted the hills in fire and gold, the air crisp with apples and wood smoke. Population, 3,142. 1 stoplight. 2 churches. A single-lane bridge that creaked when trucks crossed. Everyone knew everyone, or at least thought they did. The sort of place where neighbors waved from porches, kids rode their bikes without fear, and secrets never seemed to last long. Until October 12, 1996. That night, everything changed. It was a Saturday. The sky had dimmed early, clouds folding in like a curtain, and by dinner time, a mist clung low over the cornfields. The wind tugged leaves from the maples lining Ridge Avenue. Halloween was just weeks away, but no one in town yet suspected that a real horror was about to unfold. Leah Harper was 14 years old. A 9th grader at Elmridge Junior High. Honor roll student. Choir singer. Daughter of David and Margaret Harper, owners of Harper Orchard, famous for its cider and hayrides. She'd been at her best friend Katie's house on Bellamy Street, just 3 blocks from home. A walk she'd made countless times before. At 7:42 p.m., Katie's mom remembered Leah saying, "I'll text you when I get home," as she zipped up her red hoodie. But the message never came. No one saw what happened in the minutes between Ridge and Bellamy, where the sidewalk curved past the orchard's outer fence. Only a shadow of movement, recalled later by old Mr. Ellsworth, who'd been watching a Phillies game through his bay window. Flash of red, he said, like a bird or a coat, moving fast into the trees. The next morning, Leah's mother found her daughter's bed untouched. No shoes by the door. Phone on the charger. The red hoodie was gone. By noon, half the town was out searching. ATVs combed the apple rows. Search dogs sniffed along the creek that curled behind the orchard. Police set up a tent in the Harpers' front yard and interviewed everyone within a mile radius. And they found nothing. Not a single footprint. No blood. No torn fabric. Not even a broken branch. It was as if Leah had been plucked from the earth itself. Detective Alan Braddock arrived from Harrisburg on Monday morning. A man with a thick mustache, heavy boots, and eyes that had seen too much. He didn't believe in ghosts, curses, or legends, but he listened carefully when people talked. He visited the orchard first. The Harpers were too shaken to give a full tour, but Braddock walked the perimeter, hands in his coat pockets, head tilted as if listening to the trees. Wind moved through the branches in long, whispering sighs. Apples lay rotting on the ground, their skins split and dark with decay. He paused at the fence where Ridge met Bellamy. The corner where Leah was last seen. "No camera?" he asked Officer Durbin. The local cop shook his head. "No reason to have one. Until now." That night, Braddock sat in Leah's bedroom. The space felt paused, everything left mid-moment. Her schoolbooks open. A Taylor Dane cassette in the stereo. Posters of horses and fairy kingdoms on the walls. A green lava lamp pulsing on the dresser. He found the journal under her bed. A plain black notebook, pages thick with ballpoint scribbles. It wasn't a diary, exactly. More like fragments of thought, bits of song lyrics, doodles of eyes and trees. But around page 40, the tone shifted. "They laugh at me when I wear my red hoodie. I like it anyway. Red makes me feel strong. Sometimes I feel like someone's following me. Not every day. Only when I walk past the orchard." He stands still between the trees. Doesn't move. I think he's waiting for something. Maybe me. I told Katie, but she doesn't believe me. She said it's just a deer. It's not a deer. And then, the final entry. Written in shakier handwriting than the rest. He sees through the trees. He said if I told, the orchard would bloom red. Braddock circled the phrase and underlined, the Watcher. The case took a darker turn. By the end of October, Elmridge was no longer sleepy. The cider stand closed early. Children weren't allowed to walk alone. Churches held prayer circles. The Harpers shuttered the orchard indefinitely, claiming grief, but rumors spread fast. Leah had run away. Leah had been taken. Leah had gone crazy. Leah had become something else. Katie told the police about the stories they used to whisper at sleepovers, about the Orchard Man, a local ghost tale that stretched back to the 1800s. Supposedly, a Civil War deserter had been hanged from one of the apple trees for murder. His ghost, some said, still wandered the orchard in a red haze, searching for his next victim. Of course, everyone laughed at those stories. Until Leah disappeared. The town moves on. By Thanksgiving, the search had slowed. State investigators pulled out. Braddock returned to Harrisburg, leaving behind a thick folder marked "Cold Case." The Harpers stopped doing interviews. Margaret took a job in Harrisburg. David started drinking more. Their marriage crumbled. Winter came. Snow blanketed the orchard. The red leaves fell, and with them, the last remnants of hope. Come spring, people started planting flowers again. Kids played outside. Life resumed. And Leah Harper became just another small-town mystery. A face on a flyer. A name whispered with unease. But one person didn't move on. Jonah Caldwell was 2 years ahead of Leah in school. Quiet. Bookish. An amateur photographer who'd once lent Leah his camera for a science fair project. They weren't close, but they had spoken. She was kind to him when others weren't. She'd once stood up to a bully for him in the cafeteria. So when she vanished, Jonah noticed more than most. He remembered how Leah had looked over her shoulder, even in crowded hallways. How she'd gone silent when the wind blew against the school windows. How she always avoided walking near the orchard if she could help it. He remembered, because he saw himself in her fear. Jonah didn't believe in ghosts, but he believed in patterns. And over the years, he began collecting them. Missing posters. Newspaper clippings. Notes from classmates who remembered odd things about that week. He started interviewing people in secret. He even managed to get a copy of Leah's journal. He'd befriended the retired officer Durbin, who still lived in town and drank too much to care. And Jonah found something that no one else had. A photograph. Taken by accident, he assumed, in the background of a class field trip to the orchard 1 year before Leah disappeared. In the far right corner, just beyond the rows of apple trees, was a figure. Blurred. Tall. Dressed in something dark. No face. Just the impression of eyes, two faint, reflective dots in the shadow. Jonah stared at the photo for hours. Then, he pinned it to his wall and made a promise. He would find out what happened to Leah Harper. No matter what it took. Eli Navarro hadn't seen the Elmridge welcome sign in over 15 years. The green metal marker stood tilted at the edge of County Road 9, its white letters sun-bleached and chipped. Welcome to Elmridge. Established 1841, population 3,142. The same number. Always the same number. Like time had forgotten this town. The Corolla's tires crunched over the gravel shoulder as Eli slowed, hand tight on the wheel. Beyond the sign, the land dipped into a shallow valley, where patchy woods met stubborn cornfields and rusted silos. The scent of damp earth and manure pressed against the windows. Somewhere to the east, he knew, lay the old Harper orchard, though he hadn't thought about it in years. And yet, here he was again. Back where everything began. His mother was dead. Eli hadn't cried at the news. Not because he wasn't sad, but because grief for her had been leaking out of him for years. When the nurse called from Richfield County Hospital, her voice too calm, he simply nodded, said, "Thank you," and hung up. Estela Navarro had died quietly in her sleep, alone in the house where Eli had grown up. The house she'd refused to sell, even after her arthritis worsened. Even after her memory started fraying at the edges like an old quilt. She'd been a nurse once, at Richfield Asylum. That was how people referred to it, even after it was rebranded as the Richfield Behavioral Health Center. A sprawling brick monolith on the edge of town, now mostly shuttered, its eastern wing condemned after the state pulled funding. Eli drove past it on the way in. He didn't look. The house still smelled like mothballs and eucalyptus. Mail was stacked by the door. A clock ticked too loud in the kitchen. Dust lay over everything like ash. He lit a cigarette he wouldn't finish, opened the windows, and started clearing the attic. That's when he found the box. It was shoved behind an old trunk, half buried beneath a stack of moldy linens and one of his childhood Halloween costumes, a vampire cape, now brittle with age. The cardboard box was stained along the bottom. The word Leah was written on the lid in block letters, the ink faded but unmistakable. He sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at it for a long time. The name tugged at something in him. A face he couldn't place. A girl in the hallway at Ridge Avenue Middle. Brown hair. Quiet. Always alone. Leah Harper. The girl who vanished. The memory came back in shards, whispers in the schoolyard. Red hoodie. The orchard. Eyes in the trees. Eli opened the box. Inside were old Polaroids, some bent, some stuck together. Leah as a child, smiling by an apple cart. Leah holding a cat. Leah with a birthday cake, the candles melting fast. Beneath the photos, a dozen cassette tapes in labeled cases. Each marked with a date and a name. KDC, October 14, 96. Officer Durbin, October 18, 96. M. Harper, October 20, 96. Police interviews. He blinked, slowly. Why the hell would his mother have these? At the bottom of the box lay a small brass key, no bigger than a thumb, tied with a fraying yellow ribbon. The kind used for lockers or drawers. It had no label, but it was heavier than it looked. Eli turned it over in his hand, felt a dull weight settle in his gut. That's when he heard her voice again. His mother. Whispering like she had the night the lightning hit the oak in their backyard. He'd been 10. She'd been drinking. They buried the truth in the orchard, she'd said, her eyes wild, staring at nothing. And someone watered it. Eli hadn't understood at the time. But now he had questions. And a podcast to fill. Titled, Cold Hollow. Season 3, The Girl in the Orchard. Eli had started Cold Hollow as a side project while freelancing in Philadelphia. It wasn't slick or flashy, just a half-decent mic, some intro music he found on a royalty-free site, and his voice, steady and low, telling stories the world had stopped listening to. Missing people. Unsolved deaths. Small towns with big silences. The first 2 seasons hadn't made much money, but they earned him a small cult following. People who liked slow-burn stories. People who wanted answers. He set up in his mother's study. Cleared off her old desk. Tacked a foam blanket to the window for soundproofing. His laptop fan wheezed as he transferred files from the tapes, digitizing each one with care. The audio was rough, crackly, some warped, but it was real. In his first episode, he kept it simple. October 12, 1996. A girl vanished on her way home. No body. No trace. And no justice. Her name was Leah Harper. This is Cold Hollow. He released it on a Tuesday. By Friday, it had 22,000 downloads. By Monday, a message appeared in his inbox. No subject. No name. Just a line of text. Stop digging. The orchard still remembers. Eli ignored it. He threw himself into the research, deeper than ever. He interviewed old classmates. Reached out to Katie Chambers, now a schoolteacher in Ohio. She declined to comment, but her voice cracked when she said, "I think about her every day." He tracked down Jonah Caldwell, who now worked as a librarian in Boston. Jonah refused to speak, but later mailed him a manila envelope with a photo inside. The same one he'd pinned to his wall all those years ago. The orchard. A figure in the trees. Watching. Eli spent a whole night comparing it to satellite photos. Found the exact location. Marked it on a map. Then came the dreams. He began waking up at 3:12 a.m., drenched in sweat, the same phrase echoing in his head. He sees through the trees. Eli stopped shaving. Forgot to eat. His inbox flooded with theories, Reddit sleuths, ex-cops, armchair mediums. One caller left a voicemail of just static. Another whispered, "She's not dead. She's just waiting." He played it back 5 times before deleting it. The local paper ran a piece. Former resident digs up cold case. The Harpers refused to comment. A week later, Eli's mother's grave was desecrated. The flowers torn up. The headstone smeared with something red. No one saw who did it. But someone left a note tucked into the dirt. Stop recording. Or join her. It didn't stop him. Eli aired episode 5 the next day. He played the full tape of Margaret Harper, the mother's interview with police. The one his listeners would call, the Orchard Confession. "I don't believe she ran away," Margaret said, her voice fragile, as if cracking on the inside. "I believe Leah saw something. Something she shouldn't have." "What did she see?" "Him. The Watcher." "Can you describe?" "You don't describe him," Margaret said. "You feel him. He's like a weight. Like the air folds in on itself. And the trees, they listen." Eli sat in silence after the playback. Then whispered, "What if this isn't just a disappearance? What if it's a cover-up?" That night, someone pounded on the door of the Navarro house. 3 knocks. Then silence. When he ran outside, no one was there. But the key was gone from his desk. And in its place, laid neatly on top of his laptop, was a single apple. Rotten. Split down the middle. Bleeding red. Something was waking up in Elmridge. Something that had been buried. But Eli Navarro had already tasted the truth. And like all poisons, it would not let go easy. He would find out what happened to Leah Harper. Even if it killed him. By mid-November, the fog rarely lifted from Elmridge. It clung to the hills like breath on glass, coating the trees and fields in a cold hush. Days blurred gray. Nights came early, thick with silence. And within that silence, Eli Navarro kept digging. The episodes had gone viral. After airing The Orchard Confession, Cold Hollow surged to the top of Spotify's true crime chart. Local listeners doubled, then tripled. Then came the journalists, NPR, Vox, even a crew from Netflix sniffing for documentary rights. But Elmridge didn't take kindly to cameras. By the end of the week, someone spray-painted "Liar" across the Navarro mailbox. A stranger slashed Eli's tires at the Piggly Wiggly. A local priest left a note in his doorframe. Some stories are best left buried. This isn't justice, it's desecration. And yet, the town couldn't stop listening. Eli kept to a tight routine. Mornings at the library, where Brittletown records sat in yellowing folders. Afternoons chasing interviews, retired cops, former classmates, anyone who remembered Leah Harper. Evenings editing audio, posting transcripts, pacing the kitchen while new messages poured in. He interviewed Katie Chambers again. This time, she agreed to go on record. Leah was scared near the end, Katie said, her voice distant over Zoom. She wasn't sleeping. Kept looking over her shoulder. She told me once, he's in the trees, watching. Who did she mean? I thought she was talking about a neighbor. But now, I think she knew something she wasn't supposed to know. The most disturbing conversations weren't from Leah's peers, they were from adults. Old Mrs. Perot, retired English teacher, called Eli late one night. I remember her, of course, she said. Quiet, polite. She always wore that red hoodie. Did you ever notice anything unusual? There was a pause. A deep breath. She had bruises, Mrs. Perot said. Fading, but I knew what they were. I asked her about them once. She looked at me and said, "Can I stay in your classroom today? Just for a little while." I let her. She sat under my desk for almost an hour. Never said why. Eli felt his stomach tighten. Did you report it? I told the counselor. She said Leah's parents were going through a rough patch. That's all. Did she seem scared of them? She seemed scared of everything. Sheriff Lowell Granger had been in office during Leah's disappearance. A big man with thinning hair and a voice like gravel. Eli searched for days before finally finding him, retired, living alone in a cabin on the outskirts of Dunlow Creek. The door opened a crack. A pale blue eye studied him. I don't talk to reporters. I'm not a reporter, Eli said. I grew up here. I just want to understand what happened to her. Granger didn't answer. But something in his face twitched, like a nerve struck raw. There's nothing left to understand, he muttered, and started to close the door. Why did you resign 3 weeks after the case went cold? That stopped him. He stared at Eli, mouth hardening, jaw clenched. Get off my porch. Eli didn't leave until he heard the shotgun being loaded. Then came the key. Eli had kept it in his desk, still unsure what it opened, until he traced the Harper property line on an old zoning map and found a symbol he'd missed before, a small square marked Tools, on the far west side of the orchard. He parked 2 streets away and hiked through the brush. His breath fogged in the cold. The shed revealed itself between 2 black walnut trees, barely visible under a mess of vines and ivy. The roof sagged. One hinge was rusted clean through. The key fit. Inside, dust floated thick in the air. A rake hung by a single nail. Sacks of lime. An overturned wheelbarrow. And beneath it, a trapdoor. Eli pried it open. The smell hit him first, metallic, like rust and rot. Then he saw it. Wrapped in what had once been white cloth was a bundle, small, heavy, soaked dark in places. He peeled it open with gloves. A torn red hoodie. A t-shirt with a faded unicorn decal. Denim shorts. All saturated with dried blood. And tucked beneath the bundle, another notebook. Not Leah's diary. This one was smaller, bound in cracked green leather. Inside, a map of the orchard. Hand-drawn. Dates scribbled in red ink. Trees numbered. And 6 bright red X marks scattered across the grid. Eli took photos of every page. Then he called the Pennsylvania State Police. Forensics confirmed it. The blood was Leah Harper's. It wasn't a clue anymore. It was evidence. Episode 7 of Cold Hollow aired 2 days later. We now know that Leah Harper bled in that shed, Eli said. We know she marked something in the orchard. Something important. And we know someone went to great lengths to bury that truth. The red hoodie. The bruises. The map. All point to one terrifying reality: Leah was not just missing. She was hunted. The episode exploded. NPR reran a segment the next morning. Dateline called. Local officials reopened the case. Candlelight vigils returned to the Harper driveway. Flowers piled by the old apple cart. Students at Ridge Avenue High walked out in protest, chanting, "Find the Watcher." Elmridge had awakened. And it was furious. But some things should never be unearthed. Eli felt it first in the silence between his headphones. He had started dreaming again. Not full dreams, just images. Trees swaying without wind. Red apples that pulsed like hearts. Eyes staring from branches. He would wake with the name Leah on his lips and dirt under his fingernails. Then, the windshield note. It was waiting for him outside the diner. A torn sheet of paper tucked under the wiper blade. Written in rough block letters, like it had been scrawled in haste. "You're digging too deep. Some roots kill." No signature. No fingerprint. No camera footage from the diner lot. Eli stared at the note all night. Then burned it in his sink. But he didn't stop recording. If anything, he went deeper. He returned to the shed, now taped off by police. He walked the orchard rows, following the red XS from the notebook. One had already been dug up. Another marked an old well, capped and sealed. The third led him to the base of an ancient tree, so twisted it looked sculpted by fire. There, in the dirt, he found a child's necklace. A silver pendant, a crescent moon. Katie had worn one just like it in her middle school photo. Jonah Caldwell finally agreed to meet. They sat in Eli's car, parked outside the old movie theater. "You should stop," Jonah said, barely looking at him. "I can't," Eli said. "I'm this close." Jonah turned. "That's what Leah said." "What do you mean?" "She told me, the week before she vanished. I think I'm finally figuring it out. She asked if I wanted to help. I said no." "Why?" "Because I saw him once." Eli's blood turned to ice. "In the orchard?" Jonah nodded. "He doesn't chase you. He waits. Like the trees bend toward him. Like they want to tell him something." Eli swallowed. "Who is he?" Jonah just whispered, "He's what grows when the truth rots." Back at the Navarro house, Eli found the shed key returned to his desk drawer. But he hadn't brought it home. And on the desk chair, someone had carved 3 letters with a pocket knife. LH. He didn't recognize the initials. But as he traced them with his finger, he felt the orchards pull more strongly than ever. And behind it all, breathing, listening, something that had waited 22 years. Watching. Waiting. Still hungry. The wind had changed. It came colder now, no longer whispering through Elmridge's trees but pressing in, urgent, unnatural. Eli Navarro felt it as he stepped out of his car at the edge of the Richfield Asylum property, a dead wind, carrying no scent, no sound. The asylum had been shuttered for 16 years, its windows boarded up, its gates chained with rusted locks. Weeds burst through cracked pavement. The letters above the entry had mostly fallen off, leaving only RDGF__DES__lum. It looked more mausoleum than hospital. But for Eli, it was a beginning. The first obstacle had been access. The grounds were off limits. The building condemned. But after days of cold emails and half-truths, he found someone willing to help, Felix Monroe, former night orderly. Now in his 60s, Felix lived in a trailer just south of Elmridge, surviving mostly on canned beans and cigarettes. "You got 10 minutes, Felix said, flipping up the padlock on the rear fence. "That wing's no place for lingering. I need the West Records room." Felix nodded grimly. "Figures. That's where the fire started. Eli paused. Fire? Felix didn't answer. Just handed him a flashlight. Inside, Ridgefield Asylum breathed like a forgotten beast. The air was thick, wet, moldy. Hallways narrowed like arteries. Paint peeled from the walls in great swaths. Doors hung crooked on broken hinges. Graffiti marked the rooms like occult scars: "She's not dead," "No body/No escape," and once, chillingly, "I remember trees." The west wing was sealed off by a scorched steel door. The fire had blackened the entire corridor. Smoke stains climbed the walls like claw marks. Eli ducked under a fallen beam and stepped into the records room. Dust was everywhere, thick, undisturbed. As if even time itself had avoided this place. He found the patient logbook stored in a mildewed file cabinet, untouched for decades. Most of the names were faded, entries water damaged. Then, there it was. Harper, Leah. Age, 14. Admitted, October 13, 1996. Status, protective custody, Form 47A. Diagnosis, acute delusional disorder. Next of kin, Charles Harper, father. Discharge, redacted. The ink had bled, but not enough to hide what mattered. Leah hadn't disappeared. She had been committed. The very day after she vanished, she had been admitted under psychiatric hold, by her father, Charles Harper. The same Charles Harper who had refused to speak to Eli. The same Charles Harper who once held a seat on the Elmridge Town Council. Eli stared at the entry until his hands began to shake. This wasn't just a missing persons case anymore. It was a cover-up. He turned the page, and something fluttered out. A cassette tape, labeled in fading pen, LH. October 20, 1996. He didn't wait. Back home, he digitized the audio, filtering out static and warble. Then he pressed play. A low hum. Then a voice, male, clipped and clinical. Subject, Harper, Leah. Session 3. Dr. Benjamin Koch, presiding. A pause. Then a breath. A girl's voice. Young. Tight with fear. Is this about the orchard again? Tell me what you saw, Leah. I saw them digging. Daddy, and the man with the limp, and the other one. They had something wrapped in a blanket. She wasn't moving. Who was it? I don't know her name. She worked at the farm stand. She only spoke Spanish. I think she was already dead. And what happened next? Daddy saw me. I dropped my flashlight. He yelled. Then he said if I ever told anyone, they'd lock me up and throw away the key. And now here we are. A long silence. Then, faintly, barely audible. It's not just one girl. There are more. Eli stopped the tape. His heart pounded. Cold sweat on his neck. This wasn't delusion. This was testimony. Leah had witnessed a murder, an undocumented migrant worker buried in the orchard. And the response from her family, her town, her world? They locked her away and erased her. For years, the case had been a riddle. A myth. A ghost story passed around by teenagers and whispered by grieving mothers. But now, a brutal truth had risen from beneath the soil. Eli aired the tape as Episode 8, The Orchard Pact. We now know Leah Harper didn't vanish in 1996, Eli said, voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. She was institutionalized by her own father, then a respected civic leader, after she witnessed something no 14-year-old should ever see. The orchard was a graveyard. And those tasked with protecting Elmridge chose to protect themselves instead. The world responded with outrage. Social media exploded. Old local cases resurfaced. Human rights attorneys demanded full-scale investigations into migrant deaths on Pennsylvania farms. Anonymous tips flooded Eli's inbox. But nothing compared to what came next. A former Ridgefield nurse, his mother's old co-worker, wrote to him. "Your mother always believed Leah wasn't crazy. Said she was kept sedated, quiet. There were whispers, back then. But no one dared cross Charles Harper." And then, at the bottom of her message. Leah left in 2005. She didn't die. She vanished. Again. Eli's next steps blurred with urgency. He rechecked the Ridgefield exit logs. Leah was never officially discharged. Just removed. No forwarding address. No custody transfer. Just a blank space where her future should have been. A black hole. But he found one clue buried in billing records. A private transportation service charged for an unmarked pickup on August 9, 2005. Destination, LSW, internal transfer. LSW? Eli made a dozen calls. Finally, an ex-Ridgefield administrator picked up. Drunk, chatty. LSW wasn't a facility, he slurred. It was shorthand. Last seen walking. That's what we wrote when someone wandered off before being properly discharged. Legal gray area. If there's no body, there's no liability. Leah had walked out. Or someone had let her go. And just like before, she vanished. That night, Eli received another windshield note. Not typed this time. Handwritten. Delicate, almost feminine script. You're almost there. But you're not the only one digging. Some roots reach back. Some roots reach up. She remembers you. Below it, a pressed flower. A white lily. Eli stared at the note for hours. Then it clicked, Leah didn't just disappear twice. She may still be alive. Somewhere. Watching. Waiting. Just like the orchard. There was a smell to the orchard now. Not the sweet ripeness of harvest, not the sharp tang of apple skins crushed underfoot, but something older. Earth turned too many times. Something unburied. Something remembered. Eli Navarro stood beneath the crooked limbs of a tree near the Harper property line, staring at the red X he'd marked weeks earlier. It was the fifth one. And the last. The forensics report was conclusive. Beneath the soil of the Harper orchard, spaced just far enough apart to avoid suspicion, were 5 shallow graves. All women. All undocumented. All buried without record or ceremony. Each had fractured bones, soil in the lungs, cloth still clinging to what was left of skin and tendon. Some were buried with trinkets, a rosary, a photo of a child, a red ribbon. The orchard had grown over them. Literally. 2 trees bore twisted limbs in the shape of ribs. One apple tree had grown gnarled around a femur, curling around it like ivy. The Harper land, for all its fruit, had been fed by something else. For years, the town tasted rot and never noticed. The final piece came in the form of a phone call. It was 11:46 p.m., and Eli was reviewing edits for what would become the season finale of his podcast, an episode tentatively titled Roots of Silence. The number was unfamiliar. Knoxville, Tennessee. He almost let it go to voicemail. But something pulled him toward the receiver. Instinct. Or maybe something deeper. Hello? A woman's voice, slow and creaky as a rocking chair. I'm sorry to bother you. I don't have the internet, but I heard your show. A friend printed the transcript for me. About Leah Harper? Eli sat up straight. Yes. You knew her? A pause. Not by that name. She went by Anna. Quiet girl. Jumped at loud noises. Lived in our shelter in Knoxville in '04 and '05. Drew trees all the time. Trees and graves. Eli's hand tightened on the phone. Are you sure it was her? I never forget a child like that. She wore a red hoodie almost every day. Said her father planted bones. I thought she was, touched. But she knew things. Knew people were watching. Then one day, after a fire burned up north, she disappeared. Vanished like smoke. A silence settled on the line. She used to say, if she ever disappeared again, it meant they found her. Eli was in Knoxville 48 hours later. The shelter was still there, converted now into transitional housing. Most of the staff had changed, but the walls still carried echoes. In the back alley, facing the service entrance, someone had painted a mural years earlier. Now faded, cracked from sun and rain. But still intact. A girl in a red hoodie walking through an orchard. Only the trees weren't green. They bled. Apples wept crimson. Roots twisted like hands. And in the distance, barely visible, a silhouette of 3 men with shovels. In the bottom right corner, painted with the smallest brush strokes. LH. Eli stared at the image until the light dimmed. He asked around. Showed photos. No one had seen Anna in years. No forwarding address. No known family. Just a ghost, passing through, leaving only a painting and a handful of memories. But for Eli, it was enough. She had been real. She had survived. At least for a while. The podcast season finale dropped that Sunday. By Monday, everything changed. Public pressure forced the Pennsylvania State Police to launch a full criminal investigation. National media outlets picked up the story. Interviews were requested. Documentaries proposed. Most importantly, the orchard was excavated. And the past came up with every shovel of dirt. Charles Harper was arrested in the early hours of July 10th. The charge sheet was long: obstruction of justice, abuse of a minor, unlawful burial, and conspiracy to conceal homicide. 2 other men were indicted alongside him: Earl Denslow, a former deputy sheriff with a limp, and Gerald Coates, retired supervisor of agricultural labor permits for Lancaster County. The man with the limp. The other one. All 3 had ties to migrant labor routes. All 3 had something to lose. Elmridge was shaken to its core. Protests erupted. Apologies were issued. And for the first time in decades, the orchard was silent. No harvest that year. No sweet cider. Only memorial ribbons tied around the trees. 1 for each girl. Eli never found Leah. Not really. No photos surfaced. No fingerprints. Just whispers, like the ones she'd spoken of in her journal, through the trees. But maybe that was the point. She didn't want to be found. She wanted to be heard. And now, she was. In the final episode, Eli played one last tape. One he hadn't shared before. Something he'd found spliced onto the end of an old cassette hidden in the box labeled Leah. It was her voice, older. Worn. But unmistakable. If I disappear again, it means they found me. But I'll never stop telling the truth. Even if I have to whisper it through the trees. Then, click. Silence. Eli let the quiet roll for 30 full seconds before the credits played. He didn't narrate them. He just listened. Because somewhere out there, the orchard still remembered. And so did Leah.